Ladies and gentlemen, again, good afternoon. Please take this opportunity to move into the room and find a seat. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage an Air Force veteran and AFA's Director at Large, Molly May Potter.
Thank you everyone for being here, and what a wonderful day this has been. Before we get started on our next panel, I ask that you go ahead and take out your phones, follow AFA on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I think I got most of it covered, you know, the gist. But please, please, please follow us so that you can keep track of all the wonderful things that are going on here. Use hashtag AWS20 if you do take pictures and posts. Thank you. The topic of our next session is industry perspectives, fostering a culture of innovation. Enterprises can create innovative cultures, either knowingly or serendipitously. The Department of Defense is known to possess a culture of honor, duty, and mission effectiveness, but they are viewed sometimes as being rigid and inflexible, not qualities associated with innovation. Today, we will hear how our industry partners foster a culture of innovation. Our panel includes Mark Cherry, Vice President and General Manager, Phantom Works, Boeing Defense, Space and Security. Thomas Jones, Sector Vice President and General Manager, Airborne Sensors and Networks, Northrop Grumman's mission. John Varley, Vice President, Hypersonic Weapons, Lockheed Martin, Missiles and Fire Control. Copies of their bios are in your program. I will now turn over the podium to Major General Doug Rayberg to begin the panel and then moderate the questions and answers. To submit questions, please go to slido.com and enter the code AWS20 on Slido's website, where you can submit your questions. All right, General Rayberg, over to you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Molly May Potter. Appreciate that. By the way, to the audience, Molly May is also a combat veteran, wounded airman, as well as on the board of directors of the Air Force Association. Boy, you can't have a better start for an industry conversation this afternoon. Today we have the honor of hearing from three key industry leaders, and I sincerely bring that up because what a pleasure to be back with our industry partners. The chairman, the president, as well as the executive vice president of the Air Force Association are all graduates of industry and leadership. We know what they're going through, and we're very, very excited to host and have you three here with us today. Thank you. Your Air Force and Space Force have been doing this since the days of Orville Wright, and that's called the fostering of a culture of innovation. You know, kind of sort of in the Air Force, you say they were the ultimate garage startup. But we contend it's never been more important than now to get this right. So we're excited to hear from our distinguished guests, industry partners, all of whom have incredible experience in driving innovation. I think you're going to be very interested to hear about partners like Northrop Grumman, who delivered the B-2 spirit, transforming the landscape of strategic bombing forever. And I'll tell you, it was one hell of a fun airplane to fly, and it's like flying a spaceship. And Northrop Grumman, who is about to usher in our next generation with the B-21 Raider. Partners like Lockheed Martin, who gave us the world's most advanced fighters, the F-22 Raptor, and now the F-35 Lightning II, and who are still blazing forward with the integration of artificial intelligence, directed energy, and hypersonics. And we have partners like Boeing, who designed the new trainer, the T-7A Red Hawk, which we introduced at the Aerospace Cyber Conference in September, while keeping everyone guessing with the X-37 orbital test vehicle. Now combined, that's just a few of the acknowledged technologies that they represent in our partnership. Now I'll bet you every one of these three industry leaders kind of snicker occasionally when they hear about another UFO sighting out in the desert. So to our panelists, thank you again for volunteering to answer any questions our airmen have. Now bear in mind, this is being live streamed around the globe, so no pressure. Okay, let's get going. Please, audience, fire me your questions and don't be easy on them. And the Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force, General Sevy Wilson, asked me to put a little shameless plug in here as well. If you do have ideas on how to make the Space Force and the Air Force better, they want to hear from you. Please jump on Idea Scale and let them know what you think. So I'm going to kick this off, gentlemen, with a very softball question. Many times we hear this tension between being big and being agile, that at some point you grow too big and bureaucratic to drive real change. But companies like yours continue to prove innovation is not only possible, it's repeatable and sustainable, even in large organizations. So my question to you is this: how do you, each of you, really do it? How do you build and foster the culture of innovation in companies that are at the same time large with truly global reach? Mark, I'm going to throw that question to you to start off. Please, sir.
All right, well, good afternoon, everybody. I just want to say what a pleasure it is to be part of this esteemed panel and be with you here at AFA and share some insights. So really appreciate the invite and having a chance to spend some time with you. You know, I've had a chance to work in small companies as well as large companies. And in terms of answering that question, I kind of think there's two key tenets that keep us moving forward and keep the art of the possible going. And that is having a vision, right? Having a vision of where things can go and not being afraid to pivot off that vision. You know, I saw it when I had the chance to run Aurora Flight Sciences, a small 500-person company specializing in UAVs and autonomy. As well as the opportunity here running Phantom Works and being part of Boeing Defense and the great Boeing company. You know, there's visions of where aerospace can go and where it ought to go. And having the freedom as a member of the organization to be able to help create and shape that means a lot. Last year, I had the chance to participate in a well-known aerospace conference, South by Southwest. And you know, I asked the question, how many in the audience believe there is life outside of the Earth, i.e. intelligent life? And let me ask it, how many people in this room believe there is intelligent life outside of the Earth? Okay, that's good. So that's kind of the response I got. And the vision is, how can we connect with that life, right? If you think about that, think about Star Wars and Star Trek, it's that sort of connection that provides that vision in terms of what the art of the possible is. So in terms of sustaining that creativity, that what can happen, having that vision and what the art of the possible is, I think is really, really essential. Small companies, big organizations, small organizations, when you have that, I think that's the thing. The second thing is the type of talent that you bring in. Not just hire for capability, hiring for creativity. Capability and creativity turns what people think is impossible into the possible. All right, we used to talk to people and you look at the resumes and all that stuff, but just having a conversation around where you think that there are gaps, where you'd like to take an organization, and having that at every level, from your entry-level folks right out of college or technicians, all the way up to your senior execs. Because when you have creativity and capability, that starts to ensure you got that foundation of innovation.
Thanks, Mark. John, over to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. That was very good, Mark. And again, it is my pleasure to be here representing Lockheed Martin. And in my 40 years in industry, I think this is the most exciting times. We are using new technologies like artificial intelligence, augmented reality, multi-domain operations, data analytics, and we're tying that into a corporate strategy of digital transformation. And we're driving that strategy with purpose. And the purpose is the mission. And how we drive that down to every level of our workforce across a large enterprise is key. Because as you said, Mark, making sure everybody's involved and they understand their place in the organization. So at Lockheed Martin, we're transforming the way we do work. We're building a culture of innovation where you can fail, where you can get support. We got innovation centers popping up all over our enterprise, 24/7, where you can go in there and trial and error. You know, the old crawl, walk, run, fail fast. And making sure that we are leveraging our organizations. I'll give you an example, Hypersonics.
Absolutely.
We're working with the Air Force, Army, Navy, DARPA, the research labs to bring innovative solutions to a very challenging problem like hypersonics. And what's critical is we're bringing our supply chain along with us. And how do we get insight into the supply chain? Using technologies like digital towers, integrated real-time data, making sure that we can bring this data in dashboards to make quicker and better decisions across the enterprise. And I think making and using data for quicker and better decisions is a foundation for a culture of innovation. As we speak right now, about 3 miles up the road, we're finishing up a critical design review on an Air Force hypersonics program. And we're using all these technologies, digital twins, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, to bring designs quicker and faster than we've ever done before. And giving us a better product again, higher reliability, a design that we have confidence in, and one that we're getting ready to take to a very aggressive flight plan. You know, the other thing, we'll talk about suppliers a little later, this is team sport. We need to use this data at the customer level, at the prime level, and most important at the second and third, have an insight. Again, how do we network these factories? Last year we just cut the ribbon on a Center of Excellence for Hypersonics in Cortland, Alabama. And we are bringing all these technologies and all these machine tool technologies together to make sure we provide a product rapidly to our customer. So I think we're all saying the same thing. We're transforming now. We're building a culture and the infrastructure, which is key, for tomorrow, today. And And that's the kind of strategy we're putting forward.
It's awesome, John. Thank you. Tom?
Okay, thank you very much. And I'd also like to thank AFA for giving me the opportunity to speak on this topic at the conference panel here. So from my perspective, innovation is really all about the people and the environment that the people that they're in, or the environment that the people are in. So, I mean, to flip things around, I would almost argue with the right environment, a larger organization has the ability to be more innovative because you have more people there, right? But that environment that you need is really kind of made up of three things in my mind that I'll cover briefly here. First of all, you have to have a culture and a method of operation where every single person in the group feels free to step up and offer their opinion on things. Again, you know, there are cases of what I'd call, you know, truly innovative, inspirational leaders out there. You've probably heard of them or can imagine them. In my experience, probably 9 out of 10 of those individuals that, you know, I've run into are really people who are good at questioning assumptions, asking driving questions, and pulling the innovation out of other people. So you want to create that environment where you're always questioning the possible as a leader, and that's if you're a leader of a squadron or if you're a leader of a major division like the three of us up here with thousands of people, right? So that's step one. The other two areas I think you need to enable innovation in an organization is to have business agility. So that means you can take bright ideas and you can turn them into reality quickly. But you also need to have technical innovation. And I would argue that the key to achieving both of those goals is the same thing as having an empowered organization, okay? So having everyone free to speak up is good, but then they have to feel like they can actually go out and do something about that. I've got a big focus on empowerment in the division I run, and I basically break it down into, I say, look, there's three things you need to have an empowered organization. Everyone needs to understand what the commander's intent is. That's number one. Number two, everyone needs to have the resources to do their job so that they can actually act on the commander's intent as they run into situations without having to go and ask for permission or ask for additional resources. And the last thing is you got to celebrate successes. So how do those three things apply to agility and technical innovation? Was pretty straightforward in terms of business agility. You want everyone to, as Mark pointed out, understand the vision, understand the leader's intent, understand what the value system is, what the strategic objectives are, and how they fit into that element. If I look at technical innovation, what that means, it's the same thing kind of, it's communication, but it's understanding what the problem is. What are the requirements? What are the possible solutions? So how do we drive that in the aerospace world? I think coming up with performance specifications that are very simple, short, to the point. You know, I've heard, it was before my time, but I've heard that the spec for the F-117 was about 20 pages, including the table of contents. Compare that to, you know, some of the specifications that come out even for radars these days. You know, allowing that freedom, getting down to the essence of what the intent of something is you're procuring, allows more degrees of freedom for innovation to have. I'd also say working on horizontal protection and security, so having less secure stovepipes and SAPs so people know what they can draw on to solve problems. I understand that's a challenge, but if we look at some of the things like Dr. Roper has been talking about using speed and agility as a weapon, perhaps if we can field capabilities faster, the need for this hyper-compartmentalization would go away and is going to enable more innovation. So that's one. The second thing I mentioned is the resources. So if it's business agility, it's do you have the money, do you have the people, do you have the capital tools, do you have those elements that you need in order to be able to actually go out and tackle the problem. In terms of technical innovation, I'd argue that it's pretty much the same things, but it also goes to, do you have leadership, be it inside the Department of Defense or inside industry, that is always asking, what is the barrier that's keeping you from presenting this, right, or moving forward, right? As leaders, that's what we should be asking our team. What do you need from me so I can do this, right? And, you know, at the level that we're at, frequently those things come up to be policy, right? And that's where we need to be able to take the courageous stand in industry to question policy and to go forward. And I think there's been a lot of great progress under Dr. Roper lately where, you know, the Air Force and the DoD in general is looking at what policies can be changed to enable more innovation. So, you know, the right resources and technical innovation is knocking down those roadblocks, which frequently comes down to business. Finally, celebrate success, and that's pretty straightforward. Whether it's working in teams that have, for long times in business, had hierarchical command and control structures, and you now want to force as much capability and decision-making power low in the organization, you want to let people know that's okay. From the same standpoint as we look at the aerospace industry, we've been living in the JCIDS world, and I'm not trying to shoot holes in JCIDS. It had a very distinct purpose and still does. But if we really want to focus on speed to fleet, we need to show people that we as an industry and you guys as customers are willing to look outside the box in terms of how we develop and field capabilities, and we need to champion those things. So people and the right environment.
Thanks, Tom. Appreciate all three of your perspectives. While you've been talking, the audience has been packing this iPad with 1 million questions, so get ready for a solid set of bonus rounds. What I want to do is I want to take those questions from the audience, and I'm going to take your remarks, and I'm going to match them up, and we're going to go quick, because I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So,
A little
Mark,
rapid fire.
we're going fast. Here we go. Mark, what you've really talked about is companies, large or small, having their vision, establishing their strategy, and then taking that strategy and delivering those innovative results. So my real question from the audience here is, how do you encourage the right balance of innovation and risk-taking? Anybody can take that on.
I didn't hear you.
I'm sorry. The question really from the audience is, how do you encourage the right balance of innovation and risk-taking? Mark.
Yeah, just I want to reinforce, I don't lose the fact that you got the right team, right? That you got to invest in your people, invest in their capability and curiosity. So it's got to be a safe environment. You know, all stop, right? It's got to be an environment where people are okay to take risks. You understand where the opportunities are. You know, you provide guidelines and in terms of what you're after, but you give people the freedom, and they have the freedom to say what works, the freedom to say what doesn't work. It's got to have that safety in terms of being able to push the bounds and encouraging collaboration as well, like learning from the organization, and that safety is where I would say you have to make sure you have.
That's fantastic. John, you kind of talked about, and this is a good customer question, in this digital transformation era, and especially when you're talking about data, let me shift the thinking here because this was a really impressive question. Really, how do you see innovation being now advanced through the supply chain, which a lot of people don't tend to talk about, but so important today?
Great question. I think the supply chain is one of the most contemporary issues we have today. And building the supply chain, and the word I use is velocity. And how do we drive requirements through the first, second, and third tier of our supply chain? How do we move products and services up to our customer through the supply chain? And at the end of the day, it's about logistics. And as I said, having these digital towers and these integrated dashboards, and having, which is a paradigm shift of insight versus oversight, and how we can connect the people on the flight line with our factories, with our suppliers, and drive speed and velocity.
Yep.
And as you said, Mark, have that environment where failure is an opportunity for improvement. And just for everyone out there, just imagine the thousands of interactions we have a day between our customers, we're partners, suppliers, and customers to ourselves, and this supply chain. If we could pick the pace up just 1 or 2 steps, if we could get through some bureaucracy, if we could say, Tom, like you said, take the paper down by half, imagine the benefits that the warfighter would have. And so I see this as a contemporary issue that as industry, we got to go out and solve, because we're only going to be successful as our supply base. So, you know, I think it's critical. I think real-time data, velocity of that data, making smart decisions quicker. You know, we could spend a lot of time on this question, but I think my colleagues would agree. Without a robust critical supply base, we're not going to be successful.
So we're going to take a next step. Good question from the audience too. And Tom, this is going to be yours because it's going to really bounce off your discussion of culture, kind of that culture of stepping up. But you also kind of mentioned the customer intimacy and then the leadership mix that are very important. So the question from the audience is, given the rapid evolution of the threat, what can we do to keep pace to enable rapid response to those threats? And after you speak, I'll leave it open to any other team members to speak on too.
Okay, I'll answer that question, but first I want to go back and add on to something Mark said. It took me a while to process in my head. I think balancing that risk and innovation thing, as Mark was answering, I was flashing back to being at another AFA presentation. I think Jeff Bezos was a speaker a year or two ago, so I'm going to plagiarize from something he said because it had a pretty profound effect on me when I heard him say it. He said he likes to think of decisions as doors, and there's one-way doors and two-way doors, right? Two-way door, I walk out, it closes behind me, it doesn't lock, I can open it up. If I make a mistake, I can backtrack it, right? One-way door, it locks behind me. You might want to make sure you got your car keys before you go out. The door key would be a good thing to make sure you have, right? So, and what he said is he likes to take his two-way door decisions and delegate those down for his people to work because it builds the experience in doing that. And then the one-way door decisions, you know, he keeps for himself and spends time focusing on that, which I think is a good way of promoting that risk and allowing the failure because you're able to look at that. And when I shared that with my team back home, one of the things I mentioned is I think also just because of the capability as you get more seasoned and move up in management, what, you know, is a one-way door for one person is maybe a two-way door for you. So there's kind of this hierarchical support level. So anyways, I just want to throw that in because like I said, that had it was a pretty profound thought for me in terms of how I handled delegation and allowed risk-taking in the organization. So the question, now getting back to the actual question, right, was, you know, with the rapid advent of the threat, what can we do to increase innovation? In my organization, we like to spend a lot of time doing experimentation, where we can, pulling in the warfighter. We've got a number of programs that we do that are done in the DevSecOp type of environment, agile environment. We actually have a whole division in the sector I work in that works on large enterprise systems, and they're kind of almost the company experts in doing agile DevSecOps, pulling the operator in these sprints and looking at that. So that's obviously one way. We also do experimentation at big exercises like Northern Edge. We like to go take experimental systems up there, get feedback from the warfighter. We do experimentation with the Air National Guard with different things that they can do. So getting out, trying systems while they're still in their early stages of development, getting feedback from the customer. And something that we're paying more attention to, we also have a pretty significant amount of work that we do in live virtual constructive simulation. And I'm really trying to promote the use of LVC concepts to enable us to go out and, you know, put some of these concepts together. You know, you don't have to tie together every jet in the world with the radio and antennas to see how it works, right? You can go into an LVC environment and you can test out the TTP and do things like that. So I think availing ourselves of things like that enable us to really get feedback from, you know, you guys, the customers, the users, so we can figure out, are we headed down the right path? Do we need to change this way or that way a little bit?
Thank you. John?
If I could, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, right now, I think, Tom, you're spot on in hypersonics. We're testing early, learning fast, testing again, and really using simulations to validate our designs. And again, making rapid improvements. And I think you're right, that's the future. That's how we'll get velocity.
Thank you. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I completely agree with everything that Tom and Larry said. You know, it's one thing I'd like to throw out there, just a different thing, is on the paradigms on business models as well, right? So we're in business, and being able to test business models and rapidly change is also something that I think can help get us a capability. Like, it sounded like this morning, a public grocery store changed their business model to make money off their parking lot, right? So, that was rapid innovation on the part of Publix grocery store, and they did it to take advantage of an opportunity that was presented by all of us being here, right? Similarly, as we see the threat move and we see that the need to getting capability out, our traditional models of getting X amount of percent of margin on upfront, and then you get the O&S and all that sort of thing, we got to think about that a little differently, because in the end, we want to make sure that we're getting the right capability at the right time for all of us to be successful.
That sounded like innovation on behalf of Publix, but we won't endorse them too much here. I have a great question. This is from Anonymous, but I thought it was funny. Just below is a question that's coming from Elon Musk, and then it says, parentheses, I wish. But this is a very good question, because for the audience in front of us, we actually have leaders who are in charge of profit and loss. They're like general managers. They're the leadership of their corporations taking that strategy. So I think this next question is very applicable to each of you, especially in the arena of innovation. And the question is, how do you change a culture from being fearful of failure, parentheses, very results-oriented like the Air Force in the frozen middle, to one that will take risks and fail fast? So Tom, take that one on for us. I'll take it slowly.
I actually missed the middle part.
Yeah, it's basically how do you take the culture from being fearful of failure and taking it to one that really does take those risks and fails fast?
Yeah, well, I think it kind of goes back to the delegation of responsibility starting very early in everybody's career, right? So the one-way, two-way door type of thing again, right? Because, I mean, failure is just part of life. Yet I remember I was in a presentation, not a presentation, I was talking to some interns last year doing a Q&A, and I got asked this question, what's your biggest failure? I had to think about it, and I was like, I actually don't think about things that way, because every failure is just, engineer is just kind of like a wrong path on a decision tree. So you go back and you take a different decision tree. And again, getting to the whole empowerment thing, if you're having people having power over the decisions they make from the very beginning of their career or early in their career, and allowing them to make mistakes and learn, but you do it in a manner that's controlled, right? Mm-hmm. So you don't take someone who's been an engineer for 2 years and say, go design me a rocket from scratch, right? But you give them things that they have that ability to do, and you're building the natural inclination of a risk taker, and someone who's going to be comfortable making bigger and bigger decisions as they go on. Now, if you haven't started that way, if you're in an organization that is fearful of making mistakes, and frankly, I think a lot of the defense industry is like that, just based on the scrutiny that major acquisition programs come under, then I think it gets back to you need to have some examples where you can go out and you can test concepts, and you can fail, and you present it in terms of here's what we learned through this, or you can succeed and you have to celebrate those. So I think, what Dr. Roper and Preston Dunlap are doing with these Gateway 1 programs and Cloud 1, not programs, experiments, I should say, right, is exactly the type of thing that it takes to get people thinking, gee, what if I did this? And, well, maybe that didn't work out quite right, but look, they didn't kill it, right? They said, we learned that this doesn't quite work this way, let's try it a little bit. So, those types of experiments and then celebrating them, I think will help gradually change that if you don't have the chance to really start from scratch.
John, please.
Yeah, and I have kind of a saying that failures are just stepping stones to greatness. If you're not failing and if you're not learning, you're not going to make game-changing initiatives or breakthroughs. or changes. And I think everything rises and falls on leadership. As leaders, we need to be the example. We need to say, as Tom, as you said, the environment to fail fast. And leaders are at every level of the organization, not just the person in the top. And we have to make sure that everybody finds their place and understands that stepping stones are okay, failure is okay, and be the example, and be the example in your organization, and as you said, celebrate failures that are a two-way door, like you celebrate successes.
So Mark, I'm going to give you the tougher question. It's going to be the hybrid off of this one. So you really do manage money, and innovation has cost, failure has cost. So how do you manage that cost, the risk management? Because in the end, I think the audience would be very curious. How do you manage your money, so to speak?
Sure, that's a logical question for us business leaders. So, you know, we look at it in terms of investment, right? You make investment in your people, you make investment with capital, you make investment in your time, and you make investment in your R&D dollars, right? And that all is going with an expectation that you are going to move the ball forward. You know, let's be honest, we do a lot of hard things, right? We are making the impossible possible, and it doesn't always work out. But the aim and the responsibility that we have, not only to our senior leaders, but also to the shareholders of our company, is to get a logical return. And you do that with our best judgment. You do that by talking to the customers. And I do want to applaud. I think there's been a sea change in terms of the openness and willingness of our customers to collaborate on the problems that they're having and bringing industry in. That helps. That helps us think about how we can solve the problems, and more importantly, where we should invest and where we shouldn't invest. And that just helps across the board. So we think about it in terms of getting that investment with an expectation that we're going to get a return at some point. One thing that I think that is a fallacy is sometimes my DoD customers and IC think it's all about just the return. And I'm telling you, it's not. I think all of my partners up here would say that we recognize that as part of the industrial complex of the United States, we have a responsibility as being Americans as well. And we are willing to lean forward. We can't lean forward all the time, but we are willing to lean forward to do the right thing to help us take care of the threat and get capabilities out there.
You know, along those same lines, about what we look at when we make a business decision. I was talking to another group, employee group, about 2 weeks ago, right before the BEA conference, and a young lady in the audience made the comment, you know, I got all these great ideas, no one ever acts on them. What can we do? And my suggestion to her was, you know, I think, first of all, you have to understand how business leaders make decisions. I said, right. Get a mentor. The best thing that ever happened to me when I left graduate school, I ended up getting stuck in the cubicle right next to the chief scientist of the department that I was in. And I got to hear the conversations over the cubicle wall, but also when I get these great ideas that were cool, because I wanted to do them because they were cool, I'd say, hey, I want to do this. And it's like, okay, here's how you have to create a value proposition, right? Something that makes business sense, and here's what management looks for. And he basically taught me how to take these ideas out and get them funded, which I was doing at that point. You know, I was 23, I was doing them because it was cool and it was fun, and I wanted to work on that technology. I was able to leverage that skill as I moved on to actually deal with customers and figure out how to create value propositions for customers. But I would encourage anyone, you know, to go out and, you know, start understanding the basics of a business case, what that is. You know, I told this lady, I cannot imagine with everything on my plate that if you came forward and said, Tom, I've got something that will save time, money, or risk on something, and it doesn't cost more than it would yield, that I wouldn't say, let's do it, right? Because I mean, we're looking for those types of things all the time. So if you figure out how to structure those arguments, and even if you don't use them in your current job, if you're working with industry, that's the way we think, right? So as we go through all these things, How do you fund, agile software development? How do you build business models around Century Series? All these things, understanding how business works, understanding what a business case is, I think is a critical, I think it's a critical life skill, frankly.
Yeah, can
Go
I
ahead,
throw an
John.
example?
Yeah, please.
At Lockheed, we're standing up innovation centers, and they're open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can sign into them, and in there you can try out your ideas. You can bounce them off of subject matter experts, and you can even get support to do those business cases. And what we're finding is these ideas come to the leadership with business cases and asking for sound investments, and that's how we make our decisions quicker. So having that environment, that culture of innovation, and then the infrastructure, got to have them both.
I think this next
Watch
question.
Shark Tank.
What's that?
I said watch Shark Tank if you want to see
Yeah,
what
yeah.
a simple business case is. I mean, it's a funny show, but the elements are all there.
Right.
Thank you for the advertisement. Tomorrow is the Spark Tank, so
Spark Tank.
join us for that too. That'll be fun.
Tom's going to support.
We have to remind ourselves, we've got a room here full of war fighters who've been in war from the day they put on the uniform, when they raised their hand to join. I think next question takes into account not only a warfighting audience, your customer, but also the big and the small. So, John, I'm just going to come right back at you and say, hey, in continuous wartime environment, how do you balance the big innovations against nation-state actors while still fighting against small, asymmetric proxy forces? So essentially those big innovations from your corporation, but really having to deal with, these disparate small force problems that are out there, and how do you match those innovations?
Well, again, a good question, and I think big ideas, big innovations come along, but I always say, hey, those string of pearls, those small little innovations that you can tag and pull together, and are just as important. And being able to have game-changing ideas is great, but also having small little wins along the way that equal game-changing ideas, and providing capabilities and providing resources and what I'll say velocity of capabilities to the warfighter. I think they're both important, and I think they both have a place, and we should work both of them.
Tom?
I think technology's also actually, in sensors at least, leading us to a place where balancing that is going to be easier, right? As we move to what we call multifunction or software-defined apertures, multifunction sensors, software-defined apertures that just gobble up huge portions of the spectrum, present that all digitally to computers to process. You have the ability within a single platform procured once, accessing large parts of the spectrum, to develop software that can go against regional threats for IED defeat, or can be used to do complex EW against peer competitors' IAD systems, right? And you can adapt to that very quickly because you're just sucking in the data and using software to rapidly react to it.
Mark, you want to answer that, or do you want to go to the next round?
Yeah, let's go to the next round.
Firing away. Okay. I think this is really interesting because it's back to the data question. So this is from Ethan Kaiser. With data becoming more open and a shifting focus towards the joint all-domain command and control, multi-domain ops, how do you plan to prevent the loss of classified and controlled unclassified informations? So the question starts with the data, but really how as industry can you actually control the classification and not losing that data as you do innovation?
Yeah, I'll start off with that. So, with the advent, the more proliferation of autonomy, forward processing, closer to on the sensor and shooter side, I think that there is an opportunity to say, you know, if the adversaries have access to the data, but they can't use it, if we can spin inside, think about the OODA loop, right? And we continually to innovate and able to access and use it in ways that they just can't stay with us. You know, there's a trade-off, right? You can try to encrypt everything. You got to try to keep everything completely called classified, if you will. But there's a trade-off with the amount of effort and certainly latency that you would worry about the more and more you try to do that. I think the more innovative thing is if I let things out, but they don't know what you're using, how much you're using, you can overwhelm an adversary with the amount of data, but they don't know how you're picking it and how you're bringing it in. So those are some of the things that we're thinking about relative to the use of automation and forward processing of how that could be done.
Thanks, Mark. Tom, we're down to about the last 2 minutes, so why don't you take a minute, and then I'll pass the last minute over to John.
Okay, just like final comments or answering the same question?
You can either answer the question about data and how your company would secure the data, both classified and unclassified, especially in this domain, or whatever you wish to wrap up with.
Well, that was 15 in my second, so I don't have to come up with a short thing, right? So, yeah, I guess, you know, I gave you kind of my perspective on innovation, and again, I want to encourage everyone. I think that innovation comes from competent people who understand the problem because they're facing it every day, they're looking at it, and they come up with a bright idea and they're empowered to go out and fix it. And I mean, all the little apps that you see, be it how do you find a pizza delivery, you know, in 2 minutes or less or whatever, all these are by just regular people see a problem and they go out and solve it. And you know, I think that's important for all of us at whatever level we're at to realize that we can bring that innovation, and if you're in any sort of leadership at any level in the organization and you want it to be innovative, you have to go back to those things that I mentioned before. You have to create that culture where you can speak up, anyone can speak up, and that requires work on the part of the leader to make everyone feel like they can do that. You got to be agile, and you have to have technical agility as well, which all comes through empowerment. So, you know, that to me is the key, and I'm very proud to say I think Northrop Grumman is a company that follows through on all those practices. So that's my plug.
That's awesome. Thanks. John, final word, please.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty excited. My grandson didn't FaceTime me during this.
Perfect.
But as I started out, this is exciting time. I mean, we're just scratching the surface of innovation. We're just scratching the surface of the ability to deliver products. We're just scratching the surface with data analytics, artificial intelligence. And it's, as you said, Tom, it's leaders at every level that'll make a difference. And all of us are those leaders. So I would just, you know, as I said, crawl, walk, run, test early, learn fast, and keep driving that innovation in a culture that recognizes and appreciates it, because that's what we're trying to do.
Well, we're down to our final time. Before we go, I want to say thank you to the audience for all your questions. But let me put in a different plug. Go get your questions answered while you're here at the Air Warfare Symposium. I really do highly encourage you, especially blue suit warfighters, go to their booths, go to industry, talk to industry, because one of the key things that we at Air Force Association want to do is bring your mid-level management in, touch the face of your industry at the mid-level, and you're only going to be able to do that by going out there to the exhibit hall, go talk, go have a cup of coffee, and I think you'll be amazed at what you'll learn above and beyond these incredible questions that I think I'm going to hold in the database here. But let's give our panelists an incredible round of applause. But before you do, they have earned the coveted socks. Let's give them a big hand.